Hope the screen is visible now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Fine, fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. So let us quickly recap on what we did in the previous class. Majorly, we looked at the various formats we have for the object code creation, and those formats for SIC or SICXE to start with are three. One is a header record, second one text record, third one end record. If you look at the header record, we have divided them into various columns. So column 1 is a capital H, which talks about we are going to discuss or we are going to have a header record in that particular line of object program. Then column 2 to 7, which is again a 6-character length, is going to be the name of the program. Then 8 to 13, we are going to have the starting address of that program. Then 14 to 19, we are going to have the length of the program. That is entire object program length. What we have in that program is what we are going to have. That is precisely about header record. Column 1 H, column 2 to 7, we have the name of the program. Column 8 to 13, we have the starting address of the program. And 14 to 19, we have the length of the program. Next, we have a text record, which is important because it is going to house the actual object code that is going to be executed when you submit the program. It again has column 1 capital T to denote it is a text record. Column 2 to 7, we have the starting address of that record. Then 8 to 9, only 2 characters, we have the length of that record in bytes. And we also discussed why it is only 2 characters. Next, 10 to 69, which is about 60 characters, we have precisely the actual object code that we have, which may be maximum or around 10 instructions in that in the text record. If we have a program which is beyond 10 instructions or 10 or 30 bytes, so probably we can come to the next text record and we can have a multiple text records depending upon the size of the program. Next, we have a last record, E. E stands here for the end. So column 1 is a capital E, denoting the end of the program. Column 2 to 7, as an optional, we can provide the executable address of the program. And we also know why it is optional, because memory is not in our control. We can only notionally inform the system that if it is possible, try to execute my program from this number or from this address. But entire memory is not in the control of the user. It might be possible, it might not be possible. If we give the address, if it is available, system will try to load in that. Or if it is not available, system will try to load our program at some other location, and accordingly the program gets executed. That is the reason why the 2 to 7 is a optional. It is not a mandatory. You may give, you may avoid giving. No problem as far as the object program is created, because it is not going to make any difference as memory is not in the control of the user or the programmer. That's what we have seen. So now before we go to the actual PAS1 algorithm, now the heading what we will be discussing is the data structures and algorithm for PAS1 of a 2-pass assembler. The heading what we are going to do now here is the algorithm and data structures for PAS1 of a 2-pass assembler. It's very, very important from exam point of view. In the exam, they might ask you PAS1 or PAS2. And we have discussed in detail what are these passes, how many passes are required for an algorithm, for an assembler, why 2, why not 1, 3, depending upon the requirement. We have took it for granted, or in general, that 2 passes are required for an assembler to successfully complete the process. But however, depending upon the requirement, it may be completed in 1 pass, or it might require more passes as well. But in general, 2-pass assembler is what we'll be talking about. Now let us concentrate on PAS1. Let us look at the functionality of PAS1. As we know, the PAS1 is going to be precisely interested in assigning the addresses for each and every instruction what we have in the program. So in PAS1, we'll scan the program from start till end. While doing so, we keep on assigning. In the previous program, in the previous class program, we have seen how the address is going to be assigned, identifying the start symbol, whatever the address is specified in the operand, that becomes the starting address. Then onwards, we keep on adding the length of each instruction that is associated with that program. Thereby, we can get the address of the next subsequent instruction. We have seen that in the previous class. Hope you are all aware of that, how that is being done. 8,000 plus 3, 8,000 plus 2. We have done that. So comfortably, the addition operation was done. Accordingly, each instruction is assigned the address. Once that is done, all those addresses where labels are involved, those addresses will be saved in a table. We'll see the data structure, what it is going to be. And these addresses of labels will be stored for future use, which is going to be in PAS2. And we have so many assembler directives. Some of them will be processed in PAS1, some will be processed in PAS2, because all cannot be processed in PAS1, because PAS1 is only a limited scanning what we are going to do. Some information might not be available during PAS1 beforehand. Thereby, only some of the assembler directives can be processed, and those will be processed whichever is required. Once that is done, an intermediate file will be written. We have seen in the diagram of a PAS1, PAS2. So source program of assembly is given as an input to the PAS1. PAS1, after performing all this, will generate an intermediate file. That intermediate file will become an input to PAS2. And finally, PAS2 generates the actual object program as the output. So this is what the diagram we have visualized for PAS1 and PAS2. Now our concentration is how the PAS1 is being performed internally, because we are talking about a system software, meaning that how you as a programmer, how you as a designer is going to design the PAS1 of an algorithm for SIC, so that you can write a program such that PAS1 can be implemented. So what is input for you now? An assembly level language program of SIC has been given as input. That example what you have taken in the previous class, we can consider. That example, let us keep in mind, or any program for that matter. That program is given as an input to the SIC assembler. Now the PAS1 is going to be taken care. During PAS1, we have listed the functionality. First one is assign the address for each and every instruction. Second, store all the addresses of the labels in a data structure. Second and third, we have some of the assembly directives being processed. We'll process them at the end. The fourth topic of PAS1 is to generate an assembler, to generate an intermediate file. So now, before we go in detail about the PAS1 of a 2-pass assembler, our discussion for today is data structure and algorithm for PAS1 of a 2-pass assembler. So why we are discussing data structures and algorithm? Because we are not going to do manual assembly here. We are trying to design or generate a software, a system software rather, for an assembler, which is going to consider an assembly level program in SIC, processes that and provides us an intermediate file. So our responsibility here is, if at all you are given a task to write a program, how you are going to write a program. So for any program, we require an algorithm or a pseudocode is what we are going to look at here. Implementation is left to our requirement. You can implement in your C or C++ or anything, but that is not the requirement here today. You as a designer or a programmer should be able to know, if at all a given architecture is demanding us to generate a system software, per se in our case an assembler, then how you should be looking at the design of it. The basic algorithm has been given considering SIC architecture in mind. Likewise, we can do so for any other architecture. Remember, SIC is a very simple architecture what you consider, but in reality, architectures are very, very complex. To design such an assembler is not an easy task. It takes a lot of time and effort, and a lot of human resources are required. But right now, otherwise, you as a student now can be able to understand the internal requirement, or rather the type of amount of work what an assembler has to do from the system software perspective can be understood here. Hope it's clear now. The reason what we are going to discuss today. Fine. So before we get into the algorithm part, let us look at the data structures, because data structures are very, very trivial, or they are required rather to make sure that the program works properly. So similarly, in assembler of SIC, we have a 2 passes. we require to store some data from a pass1, and we also seen that as a functionality of pass1 that need to be transferred into the pass2 for a future use. If that is the case, we need to store some of the key data which is a result of a pass1 so that we can use that in the pass2. Now, what you have to visualize before you understand this is, imagine we have given a program to the system. You have a software, you have designed already an assembler software. We have given an SIC program like what I've taken in the previous class, the division program. Now, imagine how the program is going to be processed internally by your system software. So far, if it is done, if it has to be completed in manually, what is required for us? You have a source program in hand. Then we have the sheet of SIC or SICX sheet, which says how many bytes are there for each instruction, say LDA 3 or 4, STA 3 or 4, ADDR 2. Next third column says LDA 00, ADDR 1C. So that information is required for us. When you do manually, you can go through that manual or that particular list and start assembling. But how the system will do? So system need to keep this data internally. So that data is going to be symbol table. So symbol table and opcode table or optab are two data structures which are going to be used internally to store this data. So optab, as the name says, opcode table is going to store all these instructions what we have in the sheet, what you keep referring, LDA, STA, second column is a 3 or 4, 1 or 2, like that. Third column 00, 1F, 1C, 4B, all this information has to be given in advance to the system. Then only the system can able to process our program. If it is manually, we look into that particular table and start assembling. But if it is a system also should have a provision to have access to this type of data that can be done only through some of the data structures. And one such data structure is a optab, OPTAB. As name says optab, it represents opcode table. As again opcode name says, it is going to contain all the opcodes. What are opcodes? LDA, STA, LDCH, STCH, ADD, SUB, MOV, JUQ, what all we have in the particular SIC or SICXE, they will be listed in a table. And this table is normally called as a lookup table. Why it is called lookup table? Because the table is already generated, kept as a repository. Whenever you submit a program, a source program, the assembler will look whether the instruction what you have written is as per the document or not, because any instruction that you write should be part of the instruction set of an architecture. Suppose while writing LDA, I have written LDX. LDX is already existing. I have written say LDZ. Some mistake in the typing error. So instead of LDA, I have written LDZ. You know that LDZ is an error. But while typing, you have typed erroneously without some issue with the keyboard or whatever it is. So system has to verify LDA is the actual instruction, but you have given as LDZ, it should say it is an error. Like in C, C++, you see some errors being given whenever you compile the program. Like that, errors has to be generated. How the errors can be generated? Only by comparing what is there in the actual system, what you have submitted as an input, then only the system will be able to provide whether your input is as per the requirement of the architecture or not. For that purpose, an op table or opcode table is a already existing table or already created table in line with the various opcodes, their mission equivalents, their length of this, all those data will be kept as per the document what you have in hand, that PDF document. It will be created as opcode table, and while you process during pass 1 or pass 2, that table will be looked up, in the sense you are going to compare to the existing data with the data what you have provided as a part of the program. Thereby, the opcode table is always called as a lookup table. Lookup means we look up to this particular table only to make sure that the data what you have submitted is in line with the system denoted data or the instruction. That is the reason why opcode table is called as a optab. Okay, so opcode table, the main purpose of this is to store all the opcodes what are there in the architecture along with their mission equivalent and the length of the program, because these three are very important for us. Any other thing is only an additional information for us, but these three are very important. That is opcode, its equivalent mission value, that is a mnemonic. Then what is the length, 1 byte or 2 byte or 3 byte or 4 byte? Since we are talking about SIC, the length is always 3. There is no extra length, so that is why we have taken 3 in this example. Next, another data structure what we have is symbol table. If you look at the functionality, the second functionality is nothing but for a pass1 to store all the labels along with their addresses. If at all you have used any labels in the program, those labels need to be stored somewhere. Where it should be? It should be stored in a place called as another table, symbol table. See, optab is already generated. Whether you write a 10-line program or 20-line program or 100-line program, optab is fixed. Whereas symbol table is going to grow according, it is a variable table. It may be empty for some programs, it might be completely big for some programs, depending upon how many labels we have used in the program. If you have used no label in the program, symbol table will be empty. But optab will be always available even if you write a 2-line program, because optab need to be a repository. Thereby, we can look up to that to compare whether our program is in line with the architecture or whatever the instructions we have in the architecture. Thereby, symbol table, as the name says, label. Symbol means label. Sometimes label, symbol we use interchangeably. So symbols or labels are both on the same. So symbol table, as the name says, SymTab, is used to store all the symbols or labels that we have in the program. If you have 10 symbols, all the 10 symbols will be loaded. If you have 5 symbols, only 5 will be loaded. If you have no symbol will be loaded. Thereby, symbol table will be empty. So depending upon the current program, what is being executed or assembled, accordingly, so many symbols will be added into that. Thereby, this particular symbol table will keep on growing or shrinking depending upon the type of program what we have or the number of labels we have in the system. Thereby, the symbol table is designed using a hash table. So optab, you need not, there is no growth or there is no shrinking. The optab is fixed table. You create for one SIC instructions are fixed, optab is fixed. You are not going to change it. Whereas symbol table dynamically will keep varying. So your data structure, what you will be using, you may use as a linked list or whatever it is while designing your assembler for symbol table. Second, make sure that you are going to use a hash table for symbol table. Why it is a hash table for symbol table? You might have seen in the data structure, hashing, or maybe today while discuss about ADA, again we'll be discussing about hashing. The teacher will discuss about hashing process. So hashing is a very, very important concept in data structures, where you are going to store and retrieve the data in an efficient manner. How it is different from a normal data structure where in an array you keep on storing the data and keep on retrieving the data. In a normal data structure, let us take an array. I have an 100 integer array. I keep on adding the value. If at all I need to search for a value, I need to go for a binary search or a linear search where I use them. If it is linear search, one after the other from left to right, I keep on searching. Suppose my element is at the nth, 100th element. So what is the problem? 100 times I am going to repeat the process. But in the hashing, that problem is not going to be there. Hashing is based on a methodology, based on a formula, based on a mathematical formula. Thereby, hashing is not going to waste. Let you have 1,000 records. It is not going to waste your time, because since it is already based on a formula, storage and retrieval is based on that mathematics formula. So you can easily or rather efficiently identify your location to store the data. At the same time, your location to retrieve the data, both are going to be efficient in the case of a hash table. That's why symbol table is designed as a hash table. Why symbol table has to be done in hash table? Because symbols will keep coming dynamically. We need to store them, because it's not only storage. Tomorrow when you go to the assembly in pass2, I need to access them. Suddenly I say go to loop or go to loop 1, go to add. If I say these are the labels which I have used, I need to search for them. So searching becomes a lot of challenging task in any system. Similarly, even in assembler. So can we efficiently search? Whenever I am in need of a symbol or label, then obviously hash table comes into picture when it is an efficiency requirement. Thereby, symbol table has been designed as a hash table. So symbol table is a hash table. whereas optab is a lookup table. This is what we have to keep in mind. So any doubts up to this? These are the two data structures. In the examination, they will ask you discuss the data structures and algorithm for a pass one of a 2-pass assembler. You should talk about what is a symbol table, how it is represented, what data it is going to contain. It contains label, address, label, address. If you have used 10 labels, names of those 10 labels and their corresponding addresses. If it is an op table is going to contain all the opcodes, the equivalent mnemonics, and the length. This is how the optab is going to be. But optab is not a hash table. Optab is a lookup table. It is only one way. Just you create and start using them. You are not going to store and retrieve. Storage is already done. There is no question of retrieve. It is only comparison. If that is the case, probably we can use the normal arrays type of structure for a optab. Okay. So any doubt at this point?
No, sir.
Fine. Now let us go to the algorithm. So I don't want you to see my screen now because algorithm is not very clear here. Whatever PDF I have shared with you, you can go through that. That is going to be helpful to understand. If you are able to follow this, not an issue, but I suggest you to use your sheet that I have sent just now in the morning, which is a pass one algorithm. Okay. Now what is ready for us now? System software is ready. Assembler piece of software is ready. The source program is ready. We have those two data structures, optab, symbol table. Now the source program is submitted to pass one. What pass one is going to do is what we are going to look at. And this is the pseudo code or a algorithm, because it's not actual program. It is just a pseudo code or an algorithm or a step-by-step process wherein we can understand how when you give a program to the computer or your system software or assembler in our case, how it is going to process is what we are going to see now. Now imagine we have your program. Maybe you can consider any simple program of your choice. I have taken the previous class program, the division program. I'm going to submit the division program to this. So what is the original program? Label, opcode, operand. This is actually the source program. Label, opcode, operand. That I'm going to submit to the pass one as a source program. Now, what is the first line we have seen in the previous class program? What is the first line? What was the first line in the previous class program, division program you have taken, no?
Starting address, sir.
Start.
2000.
What is the first? You read the entire line. Division, start.
Division start 2000.
2000. Is it? So that is the program I am giving now. The first line, because any program we have to start from the line one, no? So we have to read the first line. So pass one algorithm, we are going to pass one means what? Even if you are in the loop, what is the pass one? You start from that loop, pass beginning, go till the end. Similarly, since my source program is submitted to the algorithm, our system software, during pass one, it reads line 1 to line n. What is my line 1? start. What is my last line? end. So between these two, whatever we have, including start and end, we keep on reading. So first line I have read now, and first line you might see it is a start. So label, opcode, operand. That clarity you should have. Labels, opcode, and operand, which is going to be label, which is going to be opcode, which is going to be operand. So start we write always in the opcode column. So if opcode is equal to start, so obviously when you read the first line, opcode is going to be start. If that is the case, what I need to do? I need to take the operand. What is there in the start operand? Division, start, 2000. So start is an opcode, 2000 is the operand. What is the 2000? It is nothing but the starting address. If you are in the first line, if it is a start, whatever you have in the operand is nothing but a starting address. We have to save it somewhere. Use any data structure for that. Later, okay, we have another data structure, another variable called as a LOC CTR. I will discuss LOC CTR maybe in 2 minutes from now. But right now, understand LOC CTR is a variable which we are going to use throughout the program. and I'm going to initialize that LOCCTR with the starting address. What is the starting address? Just now we have seen in the operand of a start, that becomes the starting address. Thereby, I'm going to initialize the location counter. Next, whatever I get from this, I'm going to write into the intermediate file. What do I get this from now? I will get the name of the program. I will get the starting address of the program. Both are going to be written into the intermediate file. So this line is processed. Now I will go to the next line. So like that, I keep on going to the next. So when I read the next line, I may find the next line with some instruction or with some assembly directives or the end of the program. So depending upon what I get, I will take a call. Okay, that is first part. If opcode is equal to start, else you not written, because as I said, start and end are normally written in a program. Sometimes you may omit also. Sometimes you may omit also in writing the start symbol. If that is the case, LOCCTR will be initialized to 0. Normally you specify START 2000, START 8000, START 2500, some number you specify. If you do not specify, it will be taken as 0. Even if its start itself is missing, then probably you are going to have the what you call location counter being taken as a 0. Okay, that is the first part. What you have done so far is, you have seen the first line. If a start symbol is there, we'll take what is associated with the operand. We take that as initial address, and we'll initialize the LOCCTR, which is called as a location counter, like a program counter. LOCCTR is a counter, location counter. Yesterday we have seen that 8000 plus 3, 8003, 8003 plus 2, 8005, 8000 plus 3, 8008, 8000 plus 3, 8001 B. Like how it is being done, we keep on adding. So location counter is nothing but it will be like a program counter, will be kept on incremented. Initially it will be 2000, then 2000 plus 3, then 2000 plus 5, then 2000 plus 8. It gets incremented. That is the purpose of a location counter. It will go till the end, like 20, whatever you have seen in the previous class, 2012 or 2022, something of that kind. So that is the purpose of a location counter. So along with the two data structures, that is a symbol table and opcode table, we have a variable called as a LOCCTR. LOCCTR stands for a location counter, meaning that like a program counter, it keeps on getting the address of the next instruction, because the primary focus of pass1 is to generate the address of every instruction. Thereby, to get the address of every instruction, I should know the starting address. Then I will keep on adding the length of each instruction so that I can get the address of the subsequent instructions. That is what we have done in the first part. So we have identified the start, operand is taken, location counter is initialized. If it is not there, we'll initialize that to 0. Now assume we have got 2000, we have initialized to 2000. Now, what we will see now, one line we have read, and we will be seeing some other information like instructions, assembly directives, until you reach the end of the program. So until you reach the end of the program, while opcode is not equal to end. So we have processed to start, we'll be doing all the instructions till we reach END. That means we'll be processing the instructions as well as assembly directives that are going to exist in between START and END. So while opcode is not equal to end, then I will do something. What is that I'm going to do now? I will check if it is a comment line. So don't worry about the comment line, because comment lines are denoted with star. That does not complicate ourselves. If it is not a comment line, assume there is no comment line, you can avoid that line. Even if you write in the examination, don't worry about that line, just leave that. We are not going to process comments in the algorithm. We'll assume that there is no comment. If it is not a comment line, of course, fine. No, there are no comments. Then what else it can be? It can be a label, or it can be an opcode or operand. So opcode is not equal to end. Then what we are going to see, if there is a label, because you are going to the next line. When you go to the next line, you might see LOOP, ADD, STCH. Let us assume that we have an instruction in the second line, LOOP, ADD, LD or ST, whatever it is, then STCH. So what is the we have now three information. One is as a LOOP, other one as a ADD, other one as a some information. So LOOP is under which column? It is not under the opcode column. It is under the label column, or it is under the symbol column. So we'll find that if you have any label, because every instruction need not have label. If it is a label, then I need to add that to the symbol table. So while adding also, we have to be very clear here that, as I said earlier, symbol should be unique. If I say LOOP, I should not have LOOP again. I may be having LOOP1 or A LOOP, B LOOP, some different name. So they are like your data types, they should be unique. I can't declare int a comma a because you'll get an error. Similarly, I cannot write the same loop or same label again in the same program. So I can have only one name for a given label. Another name should be different for a different kind of label. So what we are going to do now, we need to store this label, if it is encountered, into the symbol table. While doing so, we need to check if any symbol by default has repeated twice. In the sense, are we having a unique labels or not? So for that purpose, we'll search the symbol table. If it is already stored, what is the meaning now? There is an existing symbol with name LOOP, and again you have encountered another label by name LOOP, so clash is there. That means we have already had label with some name and similar name is also encountered. It becomes an error. It is a duplication. Thereby, if you search the symbol table for the current label, if it is found, meaning that there is a duplication, so we need to generate the error. Okay, next, else. Okay, you have searched the symbol table, it is not there, meaning that you don't have the new symbol in the already existing symbols of a symbol table, meaning that the encountered symbol is a very fresh, very new. Then if that is the case, there is no duplication, there is no redundancy, it is very unique. Then what I will do now, I will add that into the symbol table. While adding that, just now we have seen the symbol table data structure, which will have the label name and followed by the address. Who will have the address here? Location counter will have the address. So I'm going to add to the symbol table the recently encountered label. Since it is not already found in the symbol table, it is unique, and along with that, its location counter will be added to the symbol table. Now we have processed the labels. So what else we can have in a given instruction? If not a label, it can be an opcode or it can be operand. Now I'll come to the opcode part. If it is opcode, for example, ADD, LDA, STA, LDCH, STCH, MOV, JEQ, we have so many. I will search the second column now for opcode. That opcode, where I can check, I can only check in the op tab. If it is written as LDA, we need to check whether LDA is an existing in the part of op tab. Then I do two things here. First, I'm verifying if it is existing or not. Then I can understand what is the length of that particular. Since it is SIC, by default it is 3. You need not. If it is SIC XC, then you would have, your algorithm would have become bigger now. So we are taking SIC, length of every instruction is 3. If you search the op tab and opcode is found, that means what you have written is correct, then I will simply add 3 to the location counter. Because I am at 2000 now, I have an instruction by name LDA, and LDA is found as a part of op tab. What I will do now, I will increment LOC CTR with 3. Why 3? Because in SIC, every instruction by default is having 3 bytes, because there is only one instruction format in SIC. If the same algorithm, if you write for SIC XC, probably we have to check the second column of op tab. If it is equal to 1, add 1. If it is equal to 2, add 2. If it is equal to 3, add 3. Here that problem is not there. A simple line, just keep adding 3 to the location counter. Thereby your 2000 will become now 2003. Like that, you can keep on incrementing the location counter. Now that part is done. So opcode is over. But opcode can be what else? It can be your instruction, or it can be assembler directive. If it is instruction, you add 3. If it is assembler directive, then some action we have to take. And again, we have seen 4 assembler directives so far. One is RESB, RESW, word, and byte. So accordingly, how we are going to process. If it is not an opcode, it can be word, or it can be byte, or it can be RESW, or it can be RESB. Since we know the difference between these four, probably you should be able to understand it clearly. So if opcode is equal to word, yesterday also we have seen, we have changed word 10, word 100, word 13, there was no change because word means 3 bytes. Doesn't matter what is the value you have, so keep adding 3 bytes to the LOC CTR. We did the same thing in the previous class as well. If opcode is equal to RESW, RESW means number of words we are going to reserve. When I say RESW 5, RESW 20, yesterday also we have discussed. If it is 1, we have added 3. If it is 4, we have added 4 into 3. That is 12 we have added. Similarly here, if RESW is used, then whatever is the operand we have, multiply that with 3. Why you are multiplying that with 3? Because each word is going to use 3 bytes. So 3 into 5, 15. 3 into 2, 6. 3 into 10, 30. Depending upon what value you have written, you multiply that and add it to the location counter. We did the same exercise in the previous class and you all could understand, and this is going to help you here today. Next, if not that, what it can be? It can be RESB. So RESB means what? Number of bytes we are going to reserve, RESB. So similar to RESW, I need to multiply the operand with 1. So if you multiply any value with 1, the value does not change. So it doesn't matter if you multiply 1 into operand or same operand. 1 into 5 is also 5. 5 itself is also 5. So there is equal to multiplying 1 into operand. So we need not multiply because 1 multiplied with any number remains the number itself. So thereby I directly add the operand to location counter. So we have seen word, we have seen RESW, we have seen RESB. Then what else? It can be byte. When byte is there, you should be a little careful because byte is going to be your C. C is coming in picture. For example, if you remember some of the program, we have written C hello world, C welcome. So what is happening? It is same byte, but what is there after C is important. We have to count the number of characters we have. So thereby, when there is a byte, we have to get the number of characters into that byte, then add it to the location counter. So what I have done so far here is, after opcode is over, whatever is there in the opcode may be an instruction or assembler directive. If it is an instruction, very simple, keep adding 3. It doesn't matter which instruction we have. The only issue comes if it is a assembler directive. If it is assembler directive, it can be word, byte, RESB, RESW. Depending upon that, we know what action need to be taken. Whatever we know manually, we have put in the program perspective or the algorithm perspective. Nothing else we have done. So if it all done, still you find something else. It is not an opcode. It is not a word. It is not RESW. It is not RESB. It is not byte. What else it can be? It can be only error. By typing, you have given some wrong data, some wrong character. Thereby, it has to be a invalid opcode. If that is the case, we'll be again giving as an error message. So we have processed everything now. Each line is processed. In each line, label is processed. If it is a label, we'll add it to the symbol table. If it is opcode, we add it to 3. If it is a assembly directive, accordingly we'll take action. Everything is over. This I will repeat for all the instructions. Once this is done, I am going to add that to the intermediate file. So one line I have read, I have added to the intermediate file. Like that, I will go to the all the lines. How long I will go? Until I reach the end of the file. You have seen now, while opcode is not equal to end. So until I reach the end, I keep doing the same process. You are in while loop, repetition, repetition, repetition. Once I reach the end of the file, then my final line will be written into the intermediate file. That intermediate file will become the input for the second program. Now we have to identify at the end here. So location counter, we started with some address, plus, 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 we have done. Location counter will have some number now. In previous class also we have seen, it will be 2022. So 2022 minus 2000 gave us the 22. That is the length of the program. Similarly here, the value what is stored in the location counter subtracted with the starting address will give us the program length. That's what we will be getting as a program length. This is what we are going to do in the pass 1. So let me know if you all have understood what it is. If required, I will repeat again. Was it difficult to understand? Was it difficult?
ಯಾ ಸರ್ ಬಿಟ್
Difficult?
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸರ್
ಯಾವ ತರ?
ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್.
Confused. Fine, no problem. Since we are at the end of the class, no issue. Anyhow, we have the document with you. Please go through that. Again, in tomorrow, I may not be able to take class. That's why I took the class yesterday. So probably we'll meet on Thursday. When we meet on Thursday, I will repeat this again so that you can understand better before we go to the PAS 2. But before that, you also put some effort. Please go through that. It is not a rocket science. We have been talking about how PAS 1 is going to be, what algorithms, what data structures we have, and all those data structures have been used. Whatever we have discussed manually, we are trying to implement using a program, nothing else. Since we write a program, we have to consider all the options. That's all we are going to do here, and that's what we did precisely. So please go through that once again. If you have any challenges, definitely we'll discuss when you come back in the next class. Okay. So I will conclude with this. Before that, I will take your attendance. Okay.